Hello students, today we are going to discuss in brief the basic principles of law of international armed conflict, in short LOAC. All rules of LOAC exist at equilibrium point between two fundamental principles, principle of humanity on one hand and the principle of military necessity on the other. It must be accepted that war possesses a certain nature which cannot be ignored. On the other hand, cruelty of war must be mitigated and some rules must be instituted with the aim of controlling warfare. To find the balance between these two considerations is the role of the legislature, the states which negotiates and adopt conventions regarding LOAC or contribute through their practice and opinio juris to the formation of customary international law or rules that apply to armed conflicts. The basic principles of LOAC are military necessity, humanity, chivalry, principle of distinction, principle of proportionality and principle of necessity. Now, we are going to look into each of these principles at a glance. The first three principles are restated by US Navy Manual on the Law of Naval Warfare 1959. Military necessity permits a belligerent to apply only that degree and kind of regulated force not otherwise prohibited by laws of war required for the partial or complete submission of the enemy with the least possible expenditure of time, life and physical resources. Humanity prohibits employment of any kind or degree of force not necessary for the purpose of the war, that is, for the partial or complete submission of the enemy with the least possible expenditure of time, life and physical resources. Chivalry forbids the resort to dishonorable means, expedient or conduct. Principle of distinction requires belligerents to distinguish between military objectives and civilian persons, that is, at all times attack only military objectives. It is the norm of customary international law which is also restated in Article 48 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions. Principle of proportionality requires that all military measures taken by belligerents must be proportionate to the aim they seek to accomplish. It means that the military advantage obtained by a particular operation must not weight the damage caused to the civilian objects and the civilians by that operation. Principle of necessity requires that belligerents only adopt such measures as necessary to overpower the enemy and to bring about its surrender. Aim of the war should not be seen as the destruction of as much of the adverse belligerents' property and killings of as many members of adverse forces as possible. Rather, the proper aim is to destroy and to kill as few as possible. LOAC allows a belligerent to deviate from the norms of LOAC on the basis of military necessity, where and to that extent specific rule concerned explicitly makes reference to the derogation on military basis. If there is no specific reference, the belligerents cannot use the excuse of military necessity or otherwise the whole purpose of LOAC will be diluted. In US versus Krupp, the military tribunal observed that the plea of military necessity cannot be considered as a defense for the violation of rule which lay down absolute prohibitions and which provide no exceptions for those circumstances constituting military necessity. Another pair of principles which governs LOAC is Hague Law and the Geneva Law, which exist at the apex of LOAC. It also forms the basis upon which gaps of law can be filled and particular laws of LOAC can be interpreted specifically in case of doubt. They are principle of limitation and the principle of humanity. Principle of limitation, it is classically stated in Article 22 of the Hague Regulations. Now in Article 35 subclause 1 of the Additional Protocol 1 of Geneva Conventions 1949. The right of belligerents to use force is not unlimited. War is not total war. Limitations can be kept on means and methods of warfare. Principle of humanity requires that those who do not take part in armed conflicts so-called protected citizens should be treated humanely. It is expressed in Common Article 3 to Geneva Conventions 1 to 4, in Article 12, Article 13 and Article 27 of the 4 conventions respectively, and Article 4 of Additional Protocol 2. It has 4 facets. Requires the belligerents to treat protected persons with respect, that is negative duty of abstinence. Requirement of protection, that is positive duty on belligerents, obligation to defend protected persons from evils and sufferings brought about by armed conflicts, and to make sure that prisoners of war after their capture should be removed from the place of fight. It encompasses a principle of equality, requiring the belligerents must not engage in adverse discrimination against protected persons on irrelevant or adverse criteria, which include race, nationality, color, sex, birth, wealth, etc. Moreover, prisoners of war may be treated differently according to their ranks, higher ones with some privilege. It requires that belligerents accord humane treatment to protected persons in all circumstances. Now, let us see the 3 core pillars of international humanitarian law: jus ad bellum, jus in bello and Martens clause. Jus ad bellum, it means the right to resort to force. This terms answers the following questions. Firstly, who can resort to use of force, and in what circumstances may resort to force? Not everyone has the right to use force. If so, it would lead to anarchy. In municipal law, only state has the monopoly to use force, and the private individuals should resort to tribunals for enforcement of these claims. But in international society, there is no single supreme higher authority that has the monopoly to use force. Since states are sovereign, the right to jus ad bellum is attached to the states. In between 18th and 20th century, there was no restriction on states to resort to use of force. It has left to free choice of states. Only criteria was the requirement of a formal declaration of war, such that it would help neutral states to claim their rights. However, by the end of 19th century, war became destructive. Nationalism transformed war as a necessity for state survival, for protection of culture represented by people. It was also aggravated by the introduction of modern advanced weapons like mustard gas, which compelled the states to think over putting a restriction upon resorting to war. One of the first treaties that attempted to limit jus ad bellum was League of Nations Covenant with Article 10 to 16, which requires states to exhaust all possible means of pacific settlements before resorting to war. While in certain cases recourse to war was absolutely prohibited, the covenant did not prohibit all recourse to force. It only attempted to limit the jus ad bellum of states, but it did not expropriate the right to resort to force. Kellogg-Briand Pact is yet another step to which all but 4 states adhered, which prohibited war as an instrument of national policy and required disputes to be solved by peaceful means. It contained norms but no machinery to implement them. Charter of United Nations in a treaty binding on all state parties. Main provisions of UN Charter dealing with jus ad bellum are Article 2 subclause 4 and Articles 39 to 51. Article 2 subclause 4, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. This is considered as a part of customary international law and hence is binding on all states. Article 51 is an exemption to the prohibitive rule found in Article 2 subclause 4, which is concerned with the self-defense of the states. It allows the state that is attacked to defend itself by the way of military force and to call upon other states to come to its defense. Right of self-defense continues at least until the Collective Security Council enters into. Second is jus in bello. It means the rule relating to the conduct of warfare. Once a war has begun, there is need for some rules to regulate the relationships that arise as a result of use of force or state of hostility. It is necessary to have control on the rules of warfare, since it can be very destructive, and the protection of civilians. International humanitarian law can be defined as a branch of international law limiting the use of violence in armed conflicts by firstly sparing those who do not or no longer directly participate in hostilities, secondly limiting the violence to the amount necessary to achieve the aim of conflict, which can be independently of the causes fought for, only to weaken the military potential of the enemy. Next is Martin's Clause. In the preamble to 1899 Hague Convention 2 with respect to laws and customs of war on land, and to 1907 Hague Convention 4 respecting the laws and customs of war on land, we can find this clause. Until a more complete code of the laws of war is issued, the high contracting parties think it right to declare that in cases not included in the regulations adopted by them, populations and belligerents remain under the protection and empire of the principles of international law, as they result from the usages established between civilized nations, from the laws of humanity and the requirements of the public conscience. The clause has two main functions as summarized in ICRC commentary to additional protocols. It prevents the assumptions that whatever is not prohibited is therefore permitted, because it is not possible to codify every law or aspect of law. It should be seen as dynamic factor proclaiming the applicability of principles mentioned regardless of subsequent developments of types of situations or terminology. It also serves as the basis of interpreting LOAC in a humanitarian sense. It can be seen as a call to apply international human rights laws in order to complement LOAC and eventually to fill in its gaps. Today, Martin's Clause is a part and parcel of LOAC. It has been incorporated into specific legal provisions found in Geneva Conventions and in Additional Protocol 1, in contrast to preambular position in Hague Convention 4. It has been seen as imposing legal obligations on participants in armed conflicts. However, it has no practical relevance today. Thus, we had gone through the basic principles of international humanitarian law as the distinction between civilians and combatants, prohibition to attack those hors de combat, that is wounded and sick or prisoners of war, prohibition to inflict unnecessary suffering, principle of necessity and principle of proportionality. With this, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you.